It's pretty exciting for me, especially to be here, because I just left Google 6 months ago to go to Booking.com and has been on the stage a couple of times before, so it's quite interesting. And I'm going to take you through my roller coaster ride, I must say, of living a testing culture at Booking.com, the things that I've learned and the things that I would advise you to take on, and that will hopefully also help you in living this testing culture that you already have in your company, or hopefully that you are trying to build. So, like I said, I worked at Google for 2.5 years, then moved over to Booking.com. I worked there as a product owner, which essentially means that I lead a product team on the front end that tries to improve the product that hopefully some of you have engaged with before to try and book an accommodation. Some key figures about Booking.com. So our headquarters is based in Amsterdam. This is also where most of our tech people work. And roughly 10% of our workforce is people working in tech, so on the product within Booking.com. Our workforce in total is somewhere up in the 15,000s nowadays. Not all these people work in Amsterdam, of course. We have offices in almost 200 countries now, which is quite a lot. And also we have a lot of accommodation on the website. So we have more than 1.5 million properties at the moment, and people book more than 1.5 million room nights every night on Booking.com. The reason why I mention this is not to brag, but this is giving us a lot of information and a lot of data, of course, which will allow us to run as many tests as we can. So we like to use all this data and all these things to try and make the experience a little bit better over time. So our mission recently changed, and that is to me something that I find really exciting about working at Booking.com, where before we focused a lot on trying to help you find the perfect accommodation for your stay, whether it was business or travel, we actually shifted to helping empowering users to experience the world, which, if you come to think about it, is more than just finding a place to stay, right? When you go on a trip, you might do some activities, you need to travel over there, you go out for food. So there's lots of things happening there that we feel we could help our users a lot better at that we're doing now. And Dublin is an interesting city for this, because if you have booked your accommodation for Booking.com coming here, you may have noticed a couple of messages around your journey around attractions, which is some of the areas that we're now going to focus on as well. And of course brings a lot more different challenges and a lot more bigger opportunities also for Booking.com as a company. So one thing you hopefully know is that we like to run a lot of tests. We A/B test literally everything, and this goes as far as saying that if something cannot be a test, then very likely we won't do it. And just to give you an illustrative example, here you see somewhat of a business/product cycle on the sheet, where you have different phases that you go to up until the point where your product goes live. So this might be you have some ideation, you have some data gathering, hopefully some qualitative and some quantitative data that will help drive your hypothesis. You build, for instance, a new functionality, will get put in the code, will get put live, and then your customers can experience this. This is how things have gone for a long time. Unfortunately, a lot of companies now are adding a piece in this mix where they will actually try to test something, right? To actually expose, for instance, half of the users to figure out if it actually makes sense and if this functionality or design change or whatever it is that you do is adding value to your customers. And at Booking.com, it's a little bit different, I would say, where we don't just only test there. Obviously, a lot of the things that we do are focused around showing new features, new design changes, copy changes to our customers, and trying to see what works best for them. But we also test in a lot of other places. So it's probably safe to say that if you look at Booking.com, we test everywhere. So it's also on the back end. So trying to get the inventory from our partners, trying to help our partners to get most of the inventory sold, of course, which is an obvious thing, but also within customer service, right? We try to help you out. We try to help our customers in a way that they can get the same amount of help or more help, but also in more efficient ways. And then there's lots of things that we test internally as well, which could be processes, so the way teams are formed, the different tools that teams are using, but also from a cultural perspective, we might experiment with things. And it goes as far even if you look at the job applications or the job descriptions for Booking.com on our Working at Booking site, you might read different descriptions or different product titles, trying to get different types of people to apply at Booking.com. So we really test literally everything. So to share some more data points, 2005 is the year where we ran the first A/B test, which is, well, a long time ago, and also one of the reasons actually why we had to build our own testing solution. Because at the time, there were no testing platforms out there, right? We were essentially forced to build our own platform. And this is now so ingrained in our DNA that it will probably be very difficult to step away from this. This number we saw in Craig's presentation, so at any point in time, we have more than 1,000 A/B tests running on the site, which says something about the massive scale that we have, but also says something about the potential complications in running all this stuff together and figuring out what is essentially working or not. Something that is also interesting is this number, so 40 plus. Any idea what this means? So it's indeed related to sales, but it's the number of bookings that are currently coming from mobile. So our share of mobile is 40% of all total transactions, which of course plays a huge role in how we prioritize, how we work on our product, and the things that we develop and work on. Mobile plays a big role in all of that. So I walked into the office, which is on the Heijdengracht. It's a really nice office on day one, and as you would do with any fresh challenge, right, you dive in head first. And I didn't make such a nice splash, at least that's how I felt. It felt more like the picture here, right? Landing flat on my belly in the water, because there was a lot going on from day one, the moment that I entered this building. Essentially, it felt a bit like chaos. What you see on this slide here are all types of squares, and these squares essentially indicate the teams that we have at Booking.com. So only in our front end, we have more than 50 teams working on improving the customer experience. And if you include all the teams that we have, back-end customer service, data scientists, etc., the number goes above the 200s. So this is a massive amount of teams that we have. And I was going to be one little dot in there, and that felt a little bit chaotic, and I was wondering, okay, how can I have an impact? What will I do? How will I know what these guys over there are doing? And how will I know if I'm not conflicting with these guys that are working on something similar over there? So lots of questions. Fortunately, the onboarding process helped a lot in this. And if you zoom in a little bit, it might not be as chaotic as you think. Because if you look at the team specifically, there's very clear boundaries. There's different people of different expertises around. So I was going to be the product owner, and I work with a fantastic set of talented people that all have a slightly different expertise, such as front-end developer, back-end developers, designers, et cetera, depending on the scope. And it made already a bit more sense. And if you look at this a little bit further, you will see that all the teams are built and focused around solving a specific customer problem or a specific set of customer problems. And these might have been found out by talking to customers and trying to figure out what their pain points are and what they're trying to solve. Partially, they might be based on where we would like to go as a company, such as in the area of attractions, as I mentioned before. Or some might be spin-offs of another team, because a team has a specific scope. But since we're completely autonomous and essentially operate as a small business, we have the freedom to do essentially what we want, as long as we have a way to show value and to see if there's value there. And it might actually be that a team runs a test outside their scope that has as big of an impact that we actually decide to then build a new team around this, and that team will then start specifically focusing on that hypothesis. So the autonomous piece I touched already on, which is very important. Everyone has freedom to do what they want. Everyone has their expertise, and everyone is very open to hear from others what they have to say and to find out new ways and new angles of looking at things. We also have 100% access. And this is something that is very important, because if you are operating on yourself and you want to go into areas where you think you can add most of the value, it is important that you know as much of the business as possible. So the moment that you walk in and open your laptop, you can essentially start querying our databases to figure out what trends are happening and what type of insights we are getting outside of the data. Also, teams are small, and this is on purpose as well, because it makes us agile and allows us to change scope quickly. Because as much as we like to know our customer, right, sometimes we have to shift direction. Sometimes something might not be valuable anymore, and we might change teams. And teams might grow, and then usually they'll split off into a new team at some point. And lastly, I already touched on this, is that teams are multidisciplinary, right? We have a lot of different types of people in a team, really depending on the scope. I already mentioned designers, developers, but there might also be copywriters or data scientists or web analysts in the team to help you really perform at your best. Also, that doesn't solve the problem of still having all these different teams working on things that might be overlapping to some extent. So the question is, what do we do about this? And this goes back again to the experiment tool that we have. So this is our own A/B test tool that we've built internally that essentially touches on all the aspects and all the parts of the business. And this is also a tool that, again, everyone in product has access to, and that everyone can see what other people are doing in general, in areas that you might be interested in to do something as well, or in areas that are your specific focus, so you can keep an eye on what is actually running there. Doesn't mean that everything always goes to plan and that we don't conflict with each other from time to time. Of course not. I think Craig's example in this presentation was a nice one where we showed him some content that was not very relevant for him. And there's a team actually focusing on that specifically to try and solve this problem and to be more specific and more contextual to make sure that the right messages are shown to the customer. So I think it is safe to say that customers drive our product. But there's also one thing a little bit tricky about this, right? Which is that it's hard to predict customer behavior. And to show this, I'd like to do a little game with all of you, or a little A/B test, so to say. So I'd like all of you to stand up, please. And then I'm going to show you 2 examples of A/B tests that we actually run on the website. And I'd like you to choose which one you think performed best for our customers. And to add to that, I will trust you completely. So if you get it wrong, then please sit down. But you can remain standing up, of course. But I think you'll only be lying to yourself to not accept that you're wrong from time to time, which you will be most of the time. So the first variation is this one. This is part of our search widget, in this case, where you choose the amount of people that you're traveling with. And as you can see in the different variants, there is a small copy change here. At the top, it says ages of your children at checkout, where up at the bottom it says children's ages on July 23rd, 2016, which is the date that this customer put in for checkout. So quickly think about it. Which one performed better, you think, A or B? If you choose A, then you can remain standing. Yeah. For a second, everyone kept standing. I was like, oh, where's this going? So the second one. Here we see a part of our search widget where at the bottom or at the top there is a small shadow around the box, and at the bottom there's only a small line. There's no shadow. So quickly decide A or B. If you choose B, then you have to sit down, unfortunately. Hypothesis here was that by adding some shadow, the element will pop out a bit further, and actually it will contrast more with the elements on the side, allowing you to focus on this box, which is the most important thing that people generally focus on Booking.com, the search widget. This one might be a familiar one to you, tabbed versus no tabbed. So what happens in the A variant is when you search for something and you click on it, it will open in the same tab, whereas in B, if you search for something and click on the hotel, it will open in a new tab. So quickly decide, A or B. In this case, it is B that performed best. Most of you had this right. And then this one is a small change. So this is part of the room selection. So at the top, you see price information, amount of rooms, and then a call to action to select the room. At the bottom, you see that the number of people in the room and the price has actually been switched around. So A or B. If you choose B, that is the one that performed best. Lots of people had that wrong. And then the last one. So here you see an area at the top, which you could call an availability meter, which essentially shows you what part of the inventory that is available on Booking.com has been sold for these dates. And in the variant, you see we've added some element there where we try to provide you with alternative dates where you might find more availability should you be date flexible. So select again A or B. This is actually a trick question because this was an inconclusive test, so there was no observable difference. And this is also how customers work, right? Because we might think that we know, but in this case we don't know. Anyone thought that there was no difference between the two? I see still some people standing. Nice out-of-the-box thinking. Come to me with your resume and we might have a job for you. So customers really drive our product, and predicting customer behavior is hard. So what do you do as a company? We adapt. So teams constantly change in terms of their scope, how they're built. They might break up into new teams. Teams might disappear if there's no value. And I think the only thing you can compare this with is more or less an organism, right, where you have cells that split up into new cells. Sometimes some cells die off and they build somewhere else. And that's really how also the product teams work at Booking. We try to adapt based on the customer's needs and try to offer them the best experience where we can. So what have I learned through this process? The first thing, and one of the major things, I guess, is that failure is okay. And actually, I think I should have made the background of this slide green because it shows better that failure is not something to be afraid of or not something that you should not accept. It is something where you get most of your learnings, and it's something that you will be exposed to a lot. Because at Booking, 9 out of the 10 experiments that we run, they are a failure. And it doesn't mean that we just throw away this idea and never look at it again. We really try to figure out, okay, what happened? What do we see in the data? Do we see any other effects that might influence what it is that we want to do? And then we use this as fuel to either reiterate or to go on to a new idea. So being okay with failure is very important. One other thing, and this is a very old quote, as you can see at the bottom left, is that change is the only constant. Things change a lot, especially if you're trying to follow your customer and trying to focus on what's best for them. And not only in this part of figuring out the strategy of the company or figuring out what as a team specifically that you want to do. Since you're growing fast and changing so much, this also has an impact on you personally, right? I've been in the company now for 6 months. The vision of the company has changed once. I've changed 2 teams. I've had 3 managers. I've moved desks 4 times. So there's a lot of change happening all the time. And this is something that you have to be comfortable with and something that happens and that has an impact, of course. Another important one is that everybody has to live the testing culture. Because you can do a great job at being the advocate in your company that tries to push this testing process forward. But if people are not listening to you, or people have different ideas of how things work, or people from the top just tell you what to do anyways, even though you have this right mindset, it will be difficult for you to move forward. So one thing that makes Booking.com a great place to work for is that everybody shares this, right? Whether you are a new person joining Booking.com or whether you are the CEO, everyone has the same right to come up with an idea, and everyone's ideas will be appreciated as long as there is some data or things to support this. And oftentimes, actually, the new people to the company are a lot of value to us because they bring in fresh ideas that haven't been tested before, or they look at the thing slightly differently than all the people that have been focusing on this one product for a long time do. So this can be very valuable. Also from a data perspective, if you look only at your web analytics, you'll find lots of insights there. It can be very overwhelming. And typically, it will only tell you what is happening. But what you're really interested in, of course, is the why. And that is where the qualitative research can help you a lot, of course. And that's why at Booking.com, we have many user researchers that try to identify what the customer problems are behind the things that they're trying to solve and what potentially we could do about this. And it's really these things work together a lot to figure out what is the best thing to do for our customers. And if I should give an example, it's probably that we do a lot of user research to try and figure out what we should do, what hypothesis we can form to start testing. Then we run the test, and then obviously when we interpret the results, there's a lot of quantitative data available to figure out if we're actually improving the experiments for our customers. Another interesting one is this one. What might work before, or what worked before might not work now. We have a lot of people coming to the Booking.com site every day. A bunch of them are new. Some of them might be returning customers. But for everyone, the things that they want, their needs change over time. And what they might have preferred as a way to book now or as a way to engage with the platform before might have completely changed. So a very successful line of experimentation at Booking.com typically is trying to validate if the things that are still in the platform make sense for our users, or if we could potentially remove it to make the site faster or to try and think about things differently. Another thing that's really key to Booking is to innovate in small steps, and that you can actually do this. And that doesn't mean that all we do all day is just changing colors and dragging buttons up and down the page. It means that there's, of course, a more specific meaning around this. But what we try to do is figure out, okay, what is the big thing that we want to solve for a team, for instance, and then try to see how we can take it back to the drawing board and actually move from where we are now in small steps toward this point. And the plus side about this is that while you think your North Star might be here at some point, and when you start iterating, at one point you find out that actually the star is here. And instead of building the whole thing at once, it will allow you to then take a step back and figure out, okay, we actually go now in the other direction, instead of spending all your time redesigning your page or adding a functionality that in the end might not be what the customer actually is looking for. One thing that is key, of course, is the ability to trust your tools and to trust your data. And how we do this at Booking.com is that we have specific teams on the experiment tool that are trying to figure out, okay, how can we improve this tool? How can we get more data in there? How can we make it faster, more reliable? But also, how can we make the front end better for use? Because there's hundreds of users of this tool every day that experiment in it. And if we can make their time a little bit more efficient, we could potentially increase our testing velocity. If you can make it easier to interpret results, we could potentially make faster decisions. So there's a lot of investments that we put in here to make sure that we are able to take actions in the way that they're actually right actions, because we can trust the data, but also that we can do it quickly. And the last thing is about delighting customers. So as you can see, our mission changed slightly from only focusing on accommodation nights to actually trying to focus on empowering you to experience the world. And that means that we are going to try and bring a lot more delight in the lives of our customers. But that might not mean instant profits. So what is very important is to figure out, okay, how do you balance these short-term gains versus the longer-term strategy of the company? And that is something that we are now currently finding out in these new areas that we are exploring. And it might actually be that you have to sacrifice some of the short-term property in order to bring forward some newer areas that in the long run might be an enormous business opportunity for you and of enormous help to the customers. As an example, we could take the attractions one, right? We might decide to take over, to make the whole homepage focusing on attractions. And I'm pretty sure that that will increase or decrease the number of conversions that we have on hotel nights. But if we're able to then also get the hotel nights at a later point in time, it might be a very interesting thing to do. So delighting customers is not necessarily equal to instant profits. Profits might come later. They might not come at all, depending on what it is that you do. So what is important is to go where the tests take you. But I'd like to specify this a bit further to actually say, go where the customers take you. And this might be challenging from time to time. It might actually be scary because what you think you should be doing for your customer might not turn out to be the right thing. And being able to pivot and go in the right way is actually something that can be scary and that you might not be that willing to do. But if you do this, I think everything will be all right. So my question to you actually is, where will you go? And I don't expect an answer for this deep question now, but we can have a discussion, maybe using a few drinks at the evening event if you're interested in that. Thank you very much.